My name is Jarie Bolander. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Ethos podcast. On this podcast, we're going to take a deep dive into the traits, values, beliefs, and skills of all sorts of entrepreneurs to learn how to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient world. Let's get started. Leland Chee, welcome to the show.
This is incredible.
This
Glad to be
is
here.
Yeah, thank you. This is beyond incredible, man, because for those of you that don't know, Leland and I went to high school together. And actually, we went to junior high together, which is even more back in the day, right? So we are both Gen Xers, grew up on some of the best pop culture on the planet. Specifically, we had a love of Star Wars. And what's even cooler than that is that you, my friend, are keeper of the Holocron. You are the guy that makes sure that, or among others, that makes sure that the Star Wars universe is consistent. And it is just such an honor to talk with you. So, man, how the hell did you get that?
Well, first of all, let me be clear. I am part of a team. You know, there may have been times in the history where I was, what I did was more unique, and now there's a team of us because hopefully the work that we've done has allowed the company and to see value in what we do.
Totally.
So what is it that I do? Who am I? So officially, I'm a senior creative executive in the franchise and story group at Lucasfilm. But yeah, keeper of the Holocron is what anyone who knows me or knows what I do, that's what they would know me by. That if you see some of the credits of some of the shows and films, toward the very, very bottom, you might see keeper of the Holocron. IMDb even has like a thing called, they have a section called crazy credits. And keeper of the Holocron is what IMDb considers a crazy credit.
Cool.
And it's a pretty crazy thing.
Yeah. And how did that even happen, man? Like, I remember you in high school. You used to do the announcements, right? Was that you?
Yes, I did. I was the communications commissioner at Carmont.
Oh, that's right. Were you the one that got kicked off for a week by saying the hold your own joke, or was that someone else?
Ooh, I don't know. I don't think that was
Oh, you
me.
don't remember this?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't think I got kicked off. So I don't think it was me.
It was the best.
It was a cool thing because you go into the principal's office and you're at this little booth and you're behind a microphone. You have no idea that people are listening or what you can do, but it was a lot of fun. I really like. The thing is, the funny thing is, like, in person, I'm an introvert, put me in a group setting or one-on-one conversation that's not about Star Wars. And, it's hard to get me out of my shell, but if I've got the anonymity of a microphone or being on a stage, there's something about that you sort of love. There's the thrill of, there's actual fear that goes on, but you kind of live off that fear a little bit.
Yeah. I get it.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for bringing up my anxiety levels, because they're great.
Hey.
I mean, the fear is that's why we go on roller coasters. That's why we like to see, horror movies and things like that, is because we like to feel things, right? Sometimes we want to feel scared. Sometimes we want to feel happy. Sometimes we want to feel sad just to feel.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and getting to be a part of a company that does a lot of that does storytelling, that wants to make you feel things is I'm very fortunate to be in the position that I have.
Yeah. No, I mean, gosh, the franchise, the creativity, just overall success over the last, 40, 50 years.
Well, that's the thing, is that we also know, like, when we went to high school together in junior high, there wasn't a film of the classic trilogy. And then it would be 16 years before there would be a new film. So 16 years where for the most part, the franchise was dormant. I mean, they had seeds of other things. You'd get a Disneyland ride, or you'd get some books and comics. But in the zeitgeist of popular culture, uh, there wasn't a lot of Star Wars for a big portion. It was everywhere up until sixth grade. Like Star Wars was like our lives from 6 years old to 12 years old. Star Wars was everywhere. You could not avoid it.
Right.
And then after that, Return of the Jedi movie came out. There wasn't a whole lot. People weren't talking about it. If you were a Star Wars fan in junior or high school, you didn't have anyone to talk to. I mean, now it's different. Now there's internet. Now it's easier to find other people in the community. But back then, you felt very alone.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the gap? Why was there such a big gap? Were they just trying to figure it
George
out?
Lucas, he was working on his own time, and he wanted the technology to get to where he wanted it to be able to tell these, huge stories. But yeah, it was completely up to his timetable.
Interesting. Interesting. So he was like, there was certain stories that he needed to tell, and he just felt like the technology wasn't there to truly tell the story he wanted to tell.
Yeah, and then there were non-Star Wars stories that he wanted to tell as well. He did a movie called Willow that was this fantasy story. He did a movie called Radioland Murders. He did Howard the Duck. He did lots of things to sort of like build upon his interest, or just creatively work with people that he wanted to work with. And so he was doing other things. Yeah, and at the same time, he built ILM to create all these gigantic effects for Star Wars, and they were going and revolutionizing the entire effects industry, going from making that jump from practical models and stop motion animation to computer animation, and that group really led the charge. We grew up on the same movies, so you can see the stages of the development of that technology. We were watching Abyss, and there was the Abyss movie, and you see this water creature, and that was like one of the first times that I sort of realized, like, or questioned, like, okay, I understand film, I understand stop motion animation, I have some grasp of effects. I have no idea how they did that.
Wow.
And then they did Terminator 2 with the liquid metal Terminator, and again, you're like going, okay, I know how things are done. This is something that I can't explain. And then obviously Jurassic Park was the thing that blew everything out of the water, where it was just like, okay, now they can do anything.
Yeah, I forgot about ILM. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's like, because so as entrepreneurs, sometimes what we want to do, the world's not ready for, or more importantly, the technology is not there. So there would have been no Uber without cell phones. Just full stop. Just can't do it. The capability wasn't there. And it's interesting that there was, oh, I don't have the capability to tell the stories that I want, so I'm just going to build the stuff that I need to do, which is pretty amazing, actually. And there's some folks that do that more. There's some. I can't think of an example right now, but to build the fundamental technology and the fundamental processes to literally, I don't know how much the movie industry has expanded since ILM has these capabilities. It seems amazing. It just continues to evolve and be this wonderful, almost entirely new genre, category, and kind of platform to tell these stories.
Yeah, and George was doing that with the original trilogy as well. I mean, that's why he built Lucasfilm, but built ILM, was to be able to do that.
Yeah. Interesting. So, yeah, sometimes you got to build the stuff in order to do the stuff you really want to do. That's super cool.
I think back to your original question, I think you said you were asking me how I got to where I am.
Yeah, how did you? Yeah, oh yeah, like distracted. This is what happens when you're an older Gen Xer, right? We hadn't seen each other in a while. It was great. You came to the book signing, which was awesome. But yeah, how did you get doing this stuff? So cool.
Yeah, so let's go back. We have a shared history. We grew up in Belmont, and I'm going to start off with my pre-Star Wars life. So in Belmont, down Ralston, at the end of Ralston Avenue, was Marine World. Marine World, which is the, amusement park. They had that was the greatest park. There's no park like that anymore, where it was like you got on a raft and the animals were surround a lagoon, so you would see the animals there wouldn't be any cage in between you. It was just you on the boat and the animals. Later on, they got water slides, and of course, this was a marine park, so they had killer whales, which at the time was a little more acceptable than such things are now. I mean, it's amazing how much changes and how your perspective can change, and sometimes that perspective can change really, really fast. Whales, I mean, for me, it was a single movie called Blackfish that was like, oh my gosh, this stuff that I loved. There were some issues with it, right?
Yeah.
Tiger King did another thing, did a similar thing, and the reason why I bring up Tiger King was I loved the tigers at Marine World.
Yeah, they were great.
The Advisor, remember the Advisor local paper that everyone got on their driveways? They had a coloring contest every year for Marine World, and if you won, you could get either like an annual pass, or you could get a birthday on the birthday boat at Marine World. So I loved Marine World, and that was the thing. It's like I was gonna be a tiger trainer.
Okay,
I wanted to be a tiger. I mean, we'd do this coloring contests, and if you won, you'd get your picture in the Advisor newspaper,
right?
And it'd be with the tiger. And I've got a picture of me holding the chain at the tiger with all the other winners. There'd be different winners for each age group, or the different age groups. And yeah, so I wanted to be a tiger trainer. That was it, right? Or at least work at Marine World. How great would it be to work at Marine World? And it's just down the street. And then 84, 85 rolls along, and Oracle decides, oh, we're going to put a big building here. And that completely changes the region. And it means that my hopes of being a tiger trainer were completely dashed. So, but luckily, yeah, we had the shared passion of Star Wars. Like we said, 83, the last movie of the original trilogy comes out. And where there used to be, toy stores with rows and rows of action figures, all of a sudden, there was no Star Wars in sight. And people weren't. So going through high school, I don't remember doing Star Wars things in high school. I don't remember. There certainly weren't any movies to go see. So we didn't talk about it, right? Because there was no news. There was nothing to really talk about, And also we were getting older. And as people get older, they get interested in different things. Most people learn to put away their toys, especially after age 12. I don't know what they're doing. They're into sports, whatever. I'm still getting action figures, and I kind of justify it by doing stop motion movie making, because one of the cool things that George would do when they did those classic trilogy movies is he would do the movies, but it wasn't a secret about how they made those movies. They would release these documentaries about how they did these effects. And there was one specific shot in one documentary called, it was based on Empire Strikes Back, and it was Empire Strikes Back, the SPF. And there's one shot in there where they're talking about kids that are making their own movies. And they're talking about stop motion animation. And there's one shot that is clear in my mind where they have these kids, and they're recreating the Star Destroyer, or the asteroid chase, and they've got little rocks held by string, and the ship flying through. And you're seeing kids do it. That's the thing. It's one thing to see Ben Burtt tap on a wire, which is a very cool thing to see Ben Burtt tap on a cable to make the blaster sound, or to watch Phil Tippett, do the stop motion animation on the Tauntaun. But to see someone our age doing that, and sort of like giving us basically sort of like permission or something, like I can do that too, right? Because I'm seeing other people that are my age that are doing that. So that was very inspiring. So that gave me the excuse to dabble in stop motion. Stop motion is very hard. We did not have digital video at that time, so it was
Yeah.
also expensive because and time consuming because you would have to get the film developed and then hope that you get something. So it was definitely not for the faint of heart, and definitely, you know, there was some discouraging times there. So I pretty much realized pretty early that I wasn't going to be a stop motion animator. But what it did was it gave me an excuse to like keep getting those action figures because then I can justify, oh, they're not action figures. I'm making these movies. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. I'm a
They're
movie
not
maker.
toys. They're
I'm
not
a
toys. I'm
filmmaker.
not playing with them. I'm making movies. What are you talking about? So around this time is also when like digital, camcorders are becoming a thing. So in high school, I was always walking around with a camcorder. I filmed a lot of things, you know, parties or whatever, or just whenever we had a project that involved like a school project
Yeah.
that involved the camcorder, or if I could figure out a way to put some video component into it, we would do that. We did the greatest single William Jennings Bryan presentation ever for our AP history class. That was just like, oh, we can do whatever we want. Okay, we're gonna do video components. So we created all these points in his life and shot it, and yeah, it was a whole lot of so any excuse to incorporate video into presentations, I would jump at because I wanted to work for Lucasfilm. That was the goal then, even back then. Is like I don't know what I want to do, but I want to work on Star Wars. Even though the problem is, nobody's making Star Wars. That was an issue. That was a little bit of a problem, especially So you went to college, not sure what I was going to be able to, able to do. They don't have a film production department there. At that time, they didn't, at least. So I wasn't
What
going. I
school?
was going there to sort of figure things out.
Was that Davis?
Yeah, I went to Davis. I went to UC Davis. After a year, I had to figure out what my major was going to be, and rhetoric and communication was what I majored in because it had the most. I figured that major had the classes that I was most interested in. But on the side, I was doing other things. So it was at that time that I became a part of community access television. So in Davis, they had a big thriving community, and that was a great thing because you could become a part of the community and the city as a whole, and not just the siloed portion of it that we got as just being students.
Right.
But it was also my first time in any sort of like TV studio. So that was cool. I had done other internships along the way. I had done internships in high school. I'd done theater internships because it was all about production, right? It was all about telling stories, and it didn't matter to me what the platform was going to be. So if it was all in theater seemed to be where the most local opportunities would be because we've got local theaters. We don't have a television station in Belmont. Didn't have one. I think maybe KCSM.
Yeah, I was up at the community college.
I
They had KCSM.
Yeah. But there was, there were theaters. Like there was a theater in Stanford. There was a theater in Foster City. So these things were around. So if you wanted to do production type things like lighting and I did sound for a little bit. So it was just getting involved in production in any way possible.
So it sounds like there's this just real growing passion for the craft of storytelling. I mean, just in all its forms.
You gotta love it, and you gotta find your own way. There's not a clear path. Like
Right.
there's most jobs out there. Okay, if I go and study engineering, I can become an engineer. If I go and study computer science, then I can become a programmer. You could go study film and never become a film. It is because it's that competitive. It is because part of it is just sort of like you have to be independent and you have to find the way yourself because no one's gonna give you that path. And I've come across I've heard the story of tons of filmmakers, and each of their stories is different, some go to school, some don't go to school. And yeah, there's no set way to get into this industry. So sometimes you just sort of fall into it.
Yeah, for sure. It's like
So I grad
entrepreneurship in that way. Well, no, it's
yeah.
like entrepreneurship in that way. I'm just saying, I've interviewed actually lots of filmmaker types who have worked in production of films or that have been like, yeah, it was the best entrepreneurial training because you're independent, you come together, do a project, then you go scatter on the wind. You got to find the new thing. No one really tells you kind of what's going on. You have to find your own way. I've heard that a lot
And you've
because
got
it's
to find
just,
money.
yeah,
And
that's
you
it.
have
You
to
got
be a
to,
business person as well.
yes.
You have
So
to you have to convince other people of your vision that you have.
yeah,
So yeah, there's a lot more work to it than just the craft of filmmaking.
yeah, yeah. Interesting.
So I graduate in 93. 93 is like the job market was bad. And then, you want to go into something like TV or film, which is even, tougher.
Worse, even worse.
I did manage to get a job at a local TV station, KTSF 26. So if you remember California Music Channel, on a Friday night, you ever watched Kung Fu Theater?
Absolutely.
They would have those shows amidst a lot of foreign language programming. Cantonese news was one of them, so I started working on Cantonese news, even though I don't fluently speak Cantonese. I took a year of it in college, but I was a production assistant, and I was able to do that role, not being part of not being able to speak the language fluently. And for 3 years, I sort of like bounced from department to department. I was in news. I was in master control, which was the group that's the room where you play the tapes. You put the tapes that go on air as they go live.
The tapes.
Yeah.
And now it's just button.
Yeah.
Button.
So we grew up with VCRs, right?
Yeah.
And VCRs, you get a movie that's you get a tape that's 2 hours long. But sometimes movies go longer than 2 hours. And then you have the option of either changing the play speed a little bit to try to maximize the time, but it's at the cost of quality. But the other thing is, when you're taping their shows, if you have the remote, you can cut out the commercials if you're really fast enough. So somehow that skill of being able to press the pause button when the commercial came on, I found a job where I could apply those skills.
Wow.
Taping shows off TV.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, so I'm at the TV station for 3 years. Toward the end, there is a little entrepreneurial part of my story where I wasn't getting I wanted to do more production type work, and so I figured, I'll start shooting weddings. So I sort of dipped my toe in setting up a sole proprietorship to be able to do weddings. And maybe I'd do like corporate training videos or something. I don't know. But all I knew is it would allow me to sort of like be able to do production and create, because I wasn't finding the opportunities, as many opportunities as I was hoping. So I kind of had to try to make my own opportunities.
Did you ever want to be in front of the camera?
No, it was always, most of the time is behind the scenes. I'm not tall enough for that. I wasn't tall enough to. I mean, it's that funny, but it's a serious thing. Like, to be in front, you have to have all these things, right?
Right.
I've gone to I've been to I went to a audition, one of these just cattle calls, and like that was one of the first questions. Is like, how tall are you? It's like, I'm standing here, you can see. It's like, but like they need to get that on paper because that's a huge priority for being in theater. So yeah, I kind of learned that lesson pretty quickly that I wasn't gonna be an on camera person. So I'm working at KTSF, and I all this time I'm thinking I have in the back of my mind that I want to work for Lucasfilm, work for George Lucas, and so I'm sending applications in. We had to call up, but there was no internet at this point.
Yep.
So we had to call a hotline to get job openings. And I would be like racking up my phone bill with calling the Lucasfilm job hotline. And I was just applying for anything that I applied for, like security and a cook or dishwasher or whatever. And so I've got my stack of rejection letters or thanks but no thanks letters.
Right.
And I heard from a friend of one of our friends from high school, Dave Geisberger.
Oh, really? Oh, cool. Yeah.
Said that one of our other friends from Davis was working at LucasArts, the game division of George Lucas, and he said that they were looking for testers. So I reached out to our friend Stuart and applied for that. And January 31st, 1997, is when the Star Wars Special Edition came out. So we had a screening at the Coronet Theater in San Francisco. That was where I originally saw Star Wars for the first time. I have vivid memories of the line going around, driving by and seeing the line.
It was
around the block.
phenomenon. It was a phenomenon.
Yeah. So the special edition was playing there. There was a 10 a.m. screening, and people had been waiting there for a week. Like, so my girlfriend, now wife, at the time she lived just blocks away from this theater. So I'd stopped by that theater earlier in the week to see the people in line. And this entire time, again, this is pre-internet, so if you were a Star Wars fan, there was not a whole lot of ways to show it.
Right.
And I started to realize, wait a minute, I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan there is. Like, there are other Star Wars fans that are willing to wait in line for a week with their sleeping bags and their chairs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought I was the biggest Star Wars fan there possibly was. And then I'm like, oh no, there's other of us that are out there. I remember the Entertainment Weekly, which was the big, entertainment magazine at the time. They called the release of the special editions one of the year's biggest gambles, because they didn't know if the Star Wars fans would come back.
Because at that point it had been 97, 83, so 14 years.
14 years since there was a Star Wars movie. Now like I said, there were books, there were some video games out there, but we didn't know. It wasn't obvious that the fandom would come back. But seeing people that were waiting in line for a week was like, oh, okay, I'm not alone here. There's other people that are as passionate about Star Wars as me.
So was that sort of the aha moment of, oh wow, this has got some I mean, most entrepreneurs don't understand. Well, there's always a moment where they're like, oh, this is what convinced me that this was a big deal.
The aha moment doesn't happen until the box office,
Really? Okay.
Until the box office, because you can have the hardcore fans show up, wait in line, but is the audience in mass going to be there?
Yeah.
I mean, there were some inklings that this was different, because at that screening, it was like I said, it was a 10 a.m. screening, and the line had just gotten much larger as the day progressed. You kind of felt something was different because there was a TV news crew that was covering this.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Obviously, there was more interest than just your sort of normal. I mean, this is a movie that was a re-release of something that we'd had on videotape for years, and we'd seen on television for years. So it's like, it's just a re-release,
Yeah.
To get news coverage, to have a news van there for that was maybe some sort of indication that this was something else. So I see the movie, and there's people in costume. There's a guy in a Chewbacca costume who's like getting the crowd excited with his roaring as he goes down the aisles. Some people have lightsabers, and
these are like 1997 lightsabers, and not even
not what they were, tubes or flashlights. Yeah.
That's like serious stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the coolest things about actually getting to see firsthand like the evolution of lightsabers over the years, because they just each year they just get cooler and cooler and have more features. And so I walk out of that theater, I'm completely energized. Star Wars is back. And then I get home, and that LucasArts position that I had applied for, I had a message on my answering machine that afternoon saying that I'd gotten the job.
It's like a sign.
Pretty good day.
That's a great day. That's a pretty good day. Most people don't remember their good day. I mean, well, they do, but like the confluence of everything that, you know, that's why it's
that is my good day. That is the moment. I didn't wait a week in that line, but we did get up at 4 a.m. So I did wake up at 6, got up at 4 for 10 a.m. screen. So waited in line for 6 hours to get that. And yeah, I was like, okay, I don't have to wait in those 6-hour lines anymore.
I'm part of the team now. Part of the team. Wow.
So yeah, a game tester, like I didn't, at that point, they're looking for bodies, I mean, they want people that they know will work, but I don't know if they're looking for Star Wars experts at that time. I mean, I put that on my resume, but you could have an entire, it was an entire.
Ask me any question you want, and I got
the entire department full of Star Wars experts, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I'm a game tester for 3 years, and I'm kind of getting known in the department as being a Star Wars expert in a department full of Star Wars experts.
Wow.
So I work on several Star Wars games while I'm there. One of them, which is a game called Star Wars Behind the Magic. It was a multimedia CD-ROM.
I remember.
So we are pre-DVDs, and this thing had the full scripts. It had shot by shot of all the films with annotations to it. It had deleted scenes, and this is pre-YouTube. This is pre-DVD. So seeing it was very difficult to watch any sort of deleted scene. Now it's like everyone, once DVDs came out, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
But that was the first time you could see these deleted scenes that you'd only heard about. And there's this Star Wars has this weird thing where it's like we would see these images in books and things that weren't actually in the film, but then it sort of, you think in your mind that you've seen those scenes when you actually haven't. But maybe you read it in a book, you've seen it in a comic, you've seen a picture of it, you've heard a radio drama of it. So we thought these scenes were in the movie, but we had never seen these scenes until that moment. There was one that had a character named Biggs Darklighter, which is one of Luke's childhood buddies, and it's the scene on Tatooine where Biggs is telling Luke about how bad the Empire is. And yeah, it was just sort of like you'd heard about these things for years, and you even thought you saw them, but you hadn't seen them, and it was great to sort of see those for the first time. So I was a lead tester on this Behind the Magic product. And so, yeah, as you learn, the thing about Star Wars is, and I guess most things is, the more you know about Star Wars, the more you know that you don't know. Mm-hmm. So there were whole things like, oh my gosh, I have blind spots in my Star Wars knowledge. I think I'm a Star Wars expert. I didn't know whether there was this whole role-playing game that had been going on for years with over 100 books, building on this lore, and this was like a complete blind spot, blind spot in my Star Wars knowledge. So as you learn about all the different extensions, there was a trading card game that established a lot of lore. So getting to work on that project sort of like opened my eyes to where those blind spots were. Wow. Hopefully now I don't have any blind spots. Now I feel confident that I've discovered after 26 years, I think I've got the blind spots covered. There might be some, there's like international books that have never even been released in America that are out there. So, but I think I've got them covered. I think it's only taken 26 years, but I think I've got those blind spots covered.
Wow. Yeah. So what's the jump from game tester to keeper of the Holocron? I mean,
Yeah, so that Behind the Magic product is part of that, because we were getting a new licensee for the role playing game, Wizards of the Coast was taking over they were going to do role playing game and miniatures and trading card games. And Lucy Wilson, who was the person that hired me, she'd worked on Behind the Magic on the licensing side, and she was the head of publishing at the time. She and a man named Bill Slavacek, who worked on the West End Games role-playing game and then moved to Wizards of the Coast to work on the new role-playing game. They came up with the idea that, okay, up until that point, all the lore was being created, not just for the films, but lore that was being created in the books, that had been created by the RPG and the video games, that they should, instead of using binders and I guess they had Word documents at that time, instead of using those things, and it was mostly binders. They had these black binders that sometimes get referred to as Bibles, but really it's just a binder full of, a lot of it's just like emails and notes on manuscripts and things like that. Rather than have that as files or as pieces of paper, maybe we should create a database that will help, that will use to track this stuff. And there had been a database that was created for Behind the Magic, so there was already a foundational thing built that held some of the knowledge, but not the vast majority of the knowledge. So they created this opening for a database continuity manager, and I saw that, and I was like, okay. So I'd had experience with database, because as a game tester, that's what you use to track bugs, and you report the bugs, and as a lead tester, you get to build the database or customize the database to certain needs of the project. So for 3 years, I had been, working heavily with databases, so they needed a person with database experience. But the other thing is that you don't see every day the requirement of extensive Star Wars knowledge. That was I didn't have to offer that up this time.
Yeah,
this
you're
time
just sort of like, oh,
with a job description.
You're kind of like, oh, well, let's see. That's exactly what I do.
Yeah. So that was how I get that, make that jump to become the keeper of the Holocron.
And that was like on FileMaker Pro, like on a Mac.
It was
right?
FileMaker Pro, yeah, 2000. So Phantom Menace had come out.
Wow.
But yeah, and I still use FileMaker Pro to this day.
Really?
I mean, there was a question early on about, how much is this thing going to cost, right?
Yeah.
You want it, what is the budget for this? Is this a X number of dollars solution, or is this an X number of dollars?
Yeah.
And, FileMaker is on the much lower end of solutions. So they went with their sort of cheaper solution, and I'm kind of impressed. FileMaker gives me a lot of versatility where I can export the data in different ways. So
still
why reinvent the wheel if it works? So
wow. And I'm assuming completely proprietary. No one has access to it except internal.
Yeah, internal, and we used to share it with authors, where I would have to burn CDs to send to authors. This is again pre-internet, or there was actually internet had started to come about, but there were still security concerns about giving people direct access. So we would send out these CDs, password protected CDs, to authors. Now it's gotten to the point where we can't really do that. It was easier to do that because there wasn't a lot of unreleased film content that was going in there, or at least that wasn't accessible, or we would scrub the CD versions of the film kit. So books and video and other licensed extensions of it are, it's at that time it wasn't as the stakes aren't as high in terms of how you need to safeguard that information. We've since sort of done away with sharing those CDs. Yeah, luckily.
How big is the database now? I mean, how big is the whole company?
I mean, the size doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I could, if I fill it up with, thousands and thousands of images, depending on the quality of images.
Yeah.
So the size, you could say whatever size you want. Who cares? It has over 100,000 entries, characters, planets, vehicles, different sayings. We started incorporating smell, as we
Interesting.
do like park extensions and
Yeah, yeah,
other like
yeah.
VR
Yeah, yeah.
extensions. Sometimes it kind of helps to know where we've done a smell.
What it's gonna smell like. Yeah. Exactly. Wow.
We had this extensive conversation for a VR project that what does Mustafar smell like? And so you got a lava planet that but you don't want to you kind of want to smell, but you kind of want to smell that's not bad. So
Yeah, it can't be.
it
Yeah,
might not be
so
canonically accurate, but I think they settled on something like campfire
yeah, yeah,
smell,
yeah.
something
Whatever.
that's somewhat pleasant.
Yeah, yeah. But also puts you in the mood. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Wow.
don't know if you'd want to have like sulfur smells or
I think that would be pretty bad. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Interesting. So, man, that's quite the journey. I mean, what's interesting is that what's most important, right, is the consistency of telling the stories. It's also having a centralized place where people can really understand and get the depth of what 40, 50 years of storytelling or more. Like there's a depth to it that allows folks to kind of collaborate with you, because obviously you can't do all these books and all these other things. You license that out, right? So the consistency and the brand positioning and all that brand stuff, gosh, talk about having to really put a fine point on it. I mean, there's no, because the fans, right, they will tell you if it doesn't make sense, they're going to be like, Leland, what's up? What else to talk to, right?
So there's a couple of things. There's a couple of points to sort of bring up here to the consistency part of it. Star Wars is unique, right? Star Wars, we want a cohesive universe across multiple platforms with multiple creators. You have a lot of existing franchises that you can have the comic book franchise where the comics don't necessarily relate to the TV shows, don't necessarily relate to the movies. You can have adapted works like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, where you have a central creator, and for the longest time, the only new stories in those franchises are stories that are done by that initial creator. Very, very limiting to the amount of new storytelling that you can do, which is why you have they've loosened the reins somewhat.
Yeah.
At least on the Harry Potter side. I think on the Lord of the Rings side, it's more like, okay, we're gonna go into the deeper into the text and the notes and the margins to tell the stories. So, but Star Wars early on, there had been a bit of and coming from George, the sense that there were things that happened in the movies that could be told elsewhere. And one of the things is and this is kind of a controversial point because I'm going to bring up something called the Star Wars Holiday Special. Something another thing that's related to sort of collected memories. Like for the longest time, I didn't know if the Holiday Special was something that I just had dreamed. Like there wasn't the internet to tell me that, okay, yeah, this is what this is. This is existed.
Real, yeah.
This is this weird thing that I have fragments in my memory. I had memories of Imperial going into Chewbacca's family's house and breaking Chewbacca's son's toys. And I'm like, that is the weirdest. I have this faint recollection of this thing. But did it really happen? Was it really this? Did this crazy thing that I'm kind of remembering, did that really happen? And one of the things that they did in the holiday special was this was the first place that you saw Boba Fett. We knew about Boba Fett 2 years before Empire Strikes Back came out. How did we know? There was an action figure that was being released that was like, okay, exclusive new action figure from the new movie. You know, comes with a jetpack and fires rockets, and is going to be a major character in the movie. And this holiday special where this character was introduced. So all of a sudden, there's this. Even back then, 1978, there's a setup of expectation that like some of the storytelling is going to come from areas that aren't the films themselves or even marketing from the films. This thing came from a cartoon.
Yeah, interesting.
And action figure packaging. So right off the bat, you know, you're setting the audience up to expect to learn more from other extensions of this franchise.
Yeah, and other storytellers too.
Yeah.
Other points of view. Right. Interesting. Yeah.
And so in the 50 or so years, you know, since then, we've just been doing more and more of that.
And you think that strengthens the brand? You think that strengthens the Star Wars franchise, or
it definitely sets it apart. I mean, not every franchise is going to be able to do that. Not every franchise is going to be able to make a AAA video game title based on that franchise. Not everyone's going to want to, you know, put that sort of risk and investment into that type of thing. So yeah, it does make it unique in that way. Now there are some times where you have to, you know, there are creative decisions that need to be made at various points, you know, dating back all the way to the 70s with, you know, there would be things that happened in the comics that were even back then weren't canonical. The original Star Wars comic showed us Jabba the Hutt, a version of Jabba the Hutt that was nothing like what we saw in Return of the Jedi. We had books that came out in between. We had a book that came out in between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. That was, you know, they sort of had to tiptoe between. It featured Luke and Leia, but it did not have Han. So at the time when you're reading that book, you think, you know, Luke and Leia there might be hints that there's a, you know, some sort of romantic interest there. Well, we learned that was not going to be the case.
No.
And then, so yeah, you know, even back then there were elements that were sort of like, okay, the movies have to take precedent over all else.
Interesting.
We built up the lore in the books because, again, we had this, you know, 16-year period where George wasn't telling new stories. So we did stuff in the books that they would do these sort of checklists for George to, you know, can we do this in the books? Can we do that? And he would say yes or no. But other than that, he wasn't overly involved in a lot of the storytelling that they were doing there.
Interesting. That's a pretty bold and brave thing to do. I mean, especially when it's a franchise like this. I do think it strengthens the overall appeal of it. I mean, and it seems a little visionary too. I mean, you know, you got to sort of think about this stuff back in the 70s, like the future. Like, how do you? Again, entrepreneurs have this problem all the time. It's like, how do you see a 50-year future? I mean, yeah, we don't really know that it would have gone this way, but to have the inkling to be like, this story will have legs for almost all of time. I mean, it's the classical hero's journey story. I mean, I think George even took Joseph Campbell's class to like sort. I mean, yeah. The famous lore of it. Anyone that writes stories has like heard the story about. Yeah, George Lucas saw the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell's class and is like, that's it. That's the thing. But to just have I mean, it's truly remarkable. Just given like where it's been and the future vision and the strategy around it, while may have not have worked out, there's probably multiple times where it could have fallen on its face. I think that the thinking big, the big idea, the big grand strategy, like this is the thing I want to build. This is my vision for it.
I don't know if that's the grand strategy. I think sometimes you just sort of have to be practical. Sometimes you have to. Yeah. There's no Star Wars movies, so what are we gonna? How do we
keep it
bring
alive,
Star Wars audiences and books and video games is, for the longest time, that was the way to do that, by necessity, because you didn't have George Lucas making the films.
Yeah.
Even
because
even,
it wasn't
even the special edition wasn't, again, another a release by necessity, because the films weren't ready yet.
Yeah.
So to buy additional time to make the films, they had the special editions. They even in between the special editions, they had something called Shadows of the Empire, which was, they were calling it a multimedia event. There was a video game component, there was comics, there was all the licensees on board. So it was marketed as a film without it being a film, because the film was not ready yet. But this allowed the company to sort of line up partners and sort of like dip its toe in the water for when Phantom Menace would happen and the real, licensing push would happen.
I think we could probably go on all afternoon, but I got to get back to work too. I'm sure you do too. This has been I'm over the moon, man. I really appreciate your time. It was great seeing you at the book signing. Meant a lot to me.
Oh, it was great. Great seeing you as well.
It's so great to catch up, and just all the, it's awesome to see how everyone's sort of, gone their way. And you,
I always love seeing and talking to folks back from back home.
Yeah.
And seeing their successes.
Yeah, exactly. It's just beautiful to see. And, again, wish you all the best of luck and everything. And again, thanks for being on the show. It's been an honor. It really has.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Entrepreneur Ethos podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did creating it. My hope is that you learned something that can make you a little bit better. If you enjoyed the podcast, please do share it with friends and review it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also join my email list by visiting theentrepreneurethos.com to get my thoughts on what I'm doing to get better, as well as what I'm working on. You can also pick up my book, The Entrepreneur Ethos, if you want to learn the traits, values, and beliefs that I think we need to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient entrepreneur and, frankly, world community. Feel free to follow me on Twitter @TheDailyMBA and let me know if you have any questions or recommendations for a guest you'd like me to talk to. Also, drop me a note if you try anything we talked about on this or any other episode. I'd love to hear what's working for you. Until next time, keep getting better.